Hi everyone, my name is Tammy and welcome to my channel. For those of you who've been with me for a while, just know I appreciate you very much. And in fact, that's the reason why I'm doing this video is because I got asked a question the other day with regards to the types of oils I would suggest as having a kind of like a safety base, just from which to work if you're not really sure about what's going on with an individual, but to at least begin the process of introducing oils at a safe level. So thank you for that request. And instead of just answering that question specifically in a comment, I thought why not just do the video? So because everybody benefits from this. So here you have it. For those of you who have just tuned in, please take a look at, especially I did 31 days of essential oils, and I'm going to be doing more. Another segment on oils. There's a lot to cover, and so we're just going to pick away at this. In the meantime, I'm getting ready to do a series on blending, so that's coming up, blending of essential oils. But and no matter what, I'm really glad you're here because today we're going to talk about the oils that I would suggest that you just have in your back pocket. They're safe for all ages. They're safe with medications and pregnancy and nursing. So with that, let me just jump into it. Marjoram sweet is the first one. Marjoram sweet is actually very nice for the digestive system. It's also very soothing to the autonomic nervous system. And again, I just want to say for those of you who aren't familiar with what we're talking about here or how my approach is, it's based on 30 years of experience, meaning I've used them according to symptom relief, have done a lot of extensive amounts of independent research with regards to the individual constituents. In fact, if you go to my website, synergessence.com, you can begin, if you click on the 31 Days of Essential Oils tab, you'll see how I begin to break this down. And they're important. It's important to understand the chemical constituents because oils are powerful. They are very, very powerful. Whether they've been adulterated or not, they're going to have, that's Mimi, they're going to have an influence on the body. And so what we're looking for is to have, obviously, natural, completely natural, genuine and authentic oils that have not been adulterated. But that said, this information comes to you based off of 30 years plus of application and modification of use. So back to marjoram sweet. So marjoram sweet is actually quite nice for helping to calm the mind. It soothes the autonomic nervous system, which in turn is going to stabilize the body. It's going to actually relieve that stress response that is going on at the cellular level, which is essential for optimal health. It's essential for even helping the body revert into thriving versus surviving. The stress response is something that we have ability to regulate, but we have to be able to separate ourselves from our minds long enough to be able to do so. And marjoram sweet is one of those ones that will help you do that. I mean, I've got my list here, so if I keep looking down, it's because I want to make sure I get them all. Mandarin leaf, okay? So marjoram sweet I didn't talk about in the first series. I talked about marjoram Spanish. She has to chew with her mouth open. So in the next series, we'll go on to more about marjoram sweet, because that's one I covered in the last series. But in this series, in the next one, I'll do marjoram sweet. But for the time being, we're talking marjoram sweet tops the list here. Mandarin leaf is the next one I would suggest. That is another one that did not get discussed in the last series. I will discuss that in the next series. Although I did mention it in the post on petitgrain, and the reason for that is because it's a type of petitgrain. Mandarin leaf is a type of petitgrain. So you have to understand or recognize your botanical names in order to know which one you're getting. So sometimes it'll just be labeled, it might be labeled as Mandarin petitgrain. It might just say mandarin. So you want to make sure that you know what the botanical name is. So it's going to be a mandarin leaf. And the reason, so what petitgrain actually means petite grain. Okay, that is a French word. And so there's 3 different types of petitgrain. I better slow down here. I'm getting ahead of myself. There's the goldenrod petitgrain, which is your orange leaf. Okay, and that's your Citrus aurantium. Then you have lemon leaf. Okay, it's not the same thing as a lemon essential oil. Lemon essential oil comes from the rind. Lemon leaf comes from the leaf. Okay, then you have mandarin leaf, which obviously is mandarin leaf. Okay, that is also considered a petitgrain. And it's just because they're the small green leaves that they are extracting, distilling rather, in order to extract the oils from the leaves. So, for the sake of this video, we're talking about mandarin leaf. And that is another one because it's completely different than the orange leaf or the lemon leaf. Very, very different in chemical makeup. It's actually very high in cannabinoids, but not the types of cannabinoids that would interfere with CYP450 enzymes. It's a different series of cannabinoids that would be very beneficial to our endocannabinoid system and really kind of calm and soothe a system as well. So first one, marjoram sweet. Second one, mandarin leaf. The next one is vetiver. That one I did cover in the last series. Vetiver is just exceptional for grounding. If I had to say anything, it's just very, very exceptional for grounding. Now, a lot of the studies that continue to go on in constituents, they're still really investigating a lot of these things. So, but vetiver has not demonstrated any sort of issue. It supports the hormonal system, not a specific hormone at all. It supports the immune system as a form of stability. Okay, so this is why it's beneficial, because the more we can stabilize that hormonal system and stabilize that immune system, and we can actually really soothe the whole system. We don't have the body up in arms, so to speak, right? So that's number 3. Number 4 is Roman chamomile. It does not interfere with medications. It's really, I mean, there's some versions of it may have a little beta carotene in it, but not all of them do. So, I mean, I should say not, again, the differences are not because of necessarily the quality of the oil. Well, it is the quality, but not necessarily in a bad way. Depending on where it's grown. So your origin, where it's originating from, you want to make sure that you have a list of the constituents in the oil that you're getting. If it has beta carotene in it, then don't use it, because that actually does interact with medication. So again, depending on where it's grown, it will determine whether or not, and what my goodness, sorry, will determine your constituents. And as long as there's no beta carotene in your version of Roman chamomile, then you can use it. Roman chamomile synergistically supports the production of glutathione, which is a necessary anti-inflammatory. It also supports the phenol pathway, which is where we deactivate phenols. Too many phenols in the system will lead to a lot of inflammation. This is where we see dark circles under the eyes. We have a lot more, we see more edema. Okay, so Roman chamomile supports that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about Roman chamomile, other than the fact, I guess I want to go back to just a moment and say the reason why the constituents differ it's determined by the growing season and the environment that it grew up in or it blossomed in. And please forgive me, I'm just really kind of like, I thought I grounded myself before I started, and I'm apparently getting ahead of myself. So Roman chamomile, or any plant for that matter, their constituents change based on where they're grown. If they're grown closer to the ocean, whether they're further inland, temperature, light, water, nutrients in the soil, all will determine. So even though it's a Roman chamomile, its chemical makeup will change depending on where it's grown. So just there again, make sure the one that you have doesn't have beta carotene in it. And if it doesn't, then it's a good one to use with many people. It's very good for restless leg syndrome, exceptional for restless leg syndrome. So just want to offer that. Goldenrod is the next one. Goldenrod does not have any concerns with regards to medications. It supports the liver. It supports the fluidity of the body. It's just a nice overall, really good oil to have on hand, because it just, like I said, it serves the fluidity and the liver is responsible for making all the different chemical conversions, most of them. So I would encourage the use of that because it's also very beneficial for a stagnant liver and or liver that is struggling. So again, it doesn't interfere with medication, so I highly recommend having that one on hand. The next one is coriander leaf. Now, in the last series, I talked about coriander seed, and I don't know that I'm hoping I made that clear. So this one is coriander leaf, also known as cilantro, and we will get into that one into the next series. However, I really recommend this one primarily for digestion, and it's really good for kids. Kids who are colicky or crampy, or like maybe pre-IBS kind of issues, really superb for that. Smells to high heaven. I can't stand the smell of it. I don't like to eat cilantro either, but it is actually quite good for overall body, like I said, and primarily for the digestion. So I would suggest that one. And if you mix it with mandarin and marjoram, you probably wouldn't even smell it. But it lingers. It's one of those. It's a base note. If we're going to talk about perfumery, it's a base note, and it will linger. So, if you like cilantro, then good for you. Palmarosa is one I talked about in the last series. I strongly encourage that one because it supports the methylation cycle, primarily the folate cycle. That's how I want to say that. So it supports the folate cycle, which is important for the metabolism or the assimilation of amino acids, which is essential for all mental health. It also supports the glutamate GABA conversion, glutathione, glutamate, all of that, and that's all necessary with regards to the development of yeast or overgrowth of yeast. So it actually helps to reduce that as well. One of the things that occurs when the body is chronically stressed or taxed, again, mentally, emotionally, environmentally, is that we no longer break down the carbohydrates, more specifically sugars and or proteins. They're just not broken down to the degree to where we can use them. And so the inclusion of palmarosa actually, number one, especially with marjoram sweet, begins to stabilize that, and now we can break down the carbs. But when that doesn't happen, we have a tendency, or I should say break down the sugars. When it doesn't happen, we develop yeast. And so the combination of including palmarosa and this is will facilitate better use of sugars. It'll by eliminating the yeast, because if we reduce the yeast, then we also reduce that vicious cycle of craving sugar. Okay, I think that probably makes sense. So again, combined with marjoram sweet and any of these other oils, you actually begin to improve the body's use of sugars, and then you can begin to eliminate the overgrowth of yeast, and that does happen more frequently than we're aware of. In addition to that, palmarosa also has the effect on the folate cycle, which is essential for really breaking down those proteins and amino acids for better use. Okay, so I hope that made sense. Again, I wrote about palmarosa on the website, and you can also revisit the specific video on palmarosa. Generally, my brain does not fart like this all the time, so I'm just saying it. I'm just not. I've been trying to make videos all day, and it's just really, I keep getting a little bit stuffed. Getting in my own way here. Beyond that, I've got two more. I've got black spruce, which I really like. Black spruce really supports the health of the adrenals, not in the sense that it's activating the adrenals, it stabilizes the adrenals. I know that I've talked about angelica root doing this, but there's a little bit of concern with regards to angelica root, so I don't recommend it for this. Black spruce actually supports the balance of the thyroid and the adrenal relationship, because when the adrenals become overly taxed, they default to the thyroid, and so the black spruce actually helps to compensate for that and help kind of, again, stabilize that relationship, which is essential for restoring wellness to the body, is that stability. So black spruce is one I would suggest, and that's another one we'll be going into further into the next series. And the final one is cypress. Now, and by this cypress, I'm not talking about the blue Australian cypress. I'm talking about the cypress that I mentioned a couple weeks ago. This one is, given the amount, how do I want to say this? First and foremost, it doesn't conflict with medications, so that's off. That's not even a concern at this point. And it because of the degree of stress. Okay, and the truth is, every single one of us is stressed. And I'm not, again, just talking financially or mentally or emotionally. I'm talking because of the environment. And I know I keep saying that, I keep repeating myself, but it's a fact. We have 45 million chemicals influencing our system beyond the foods our natural foods that we eat, and just natural chemicals that we're exposed to through the oils. There's 45 million man-made chemicals currently being used around the world, which includes your medications, your food additives, your food colorings, you name it, things in the clothes. Over 70,000 of them have been confirmed endocrine disruptors. That's significant. And so because of that, the body is stressed. And that is important because dopamine plays a fundamental role with regards to stress and the way the body's reacting to it. I just did a video for IGTV, and what I mentioned in that is that dopamine has 5 receptors. And they're located throughout the body, not just in the brain. They're in the lungs, they're in the kidneys, and it's all responsible for movement. Now, we do recognize dopamine as the addiction neurotransmitter, but just hear this out. It's not just dopamine. Because if you drink alcohol, you're also influencing glutamate and GABA. If you take opiates, then you're also influencing the endogenous opioid system. So it's not just dopamine. Dopamine is the reward neurotransmitter, but it has a number of roles, primarily around the area of movement. And because of this degree of stress, I just want to say this much. And I talked about this with Angelica. We're all basically living with a form of addiction. Now, addiction, by definition, is a change to the brain structure. Okay, it's not the chemicals that you use, it's a change to the brain structure. That is the true definition of addiction. And science has been able to prove that there's a number of substances on the planet, from caffeine to cocaine and everything in between, that has a direct influence on altering that change, creating that change. Okay, so altering the brain. So these substances have the ability to change the brain structure. That is the true definition of addiction. So 90% of the planet consumes caffeine on a regular basis. There you have it. You have an addiction. Okay, and I don't mean anything derogatory about that, because I've actually lived with my own addictions to substances. So I'm not making light of this. What I am saying is it's time to be real. And dopamine is significant because we have increasing levels of obesity, okay, disordered eating. We have obviously addiction to substances and behaviors. We have overthinking, overthinking is a good way to put that. We have movement disorders like Parkinson's and other, rigidity disorders. These are all linked to dopamine. Okay, so dopamine is about movement. Autism and schizophrenia are also tied into all of this, into dopamine. While it's not the only neurotransmitter, it's affecting the repetitive behaviors, the stimming, the scripting, all the repetitive behaviors, cognitive issues. This is all linked to the ability of the free flow of dopamine. Again, it has 5 receptors, 2 of them of which are used for inflammation. The other 3 are anti-inflammatory activities. And so the cypress actually helps to keep this regulated, because dopamine is, besides addiction and weight issues, it's also linked to kidney issues, blood pressure issues, respiratory issues, digestive issues. And it all has to do with mobility. Okay, if we think about the fluidity of the body, and we think about how tense we get when we get stressed, we seize up. The lymph stagnates. Our heartbeat shortens. Our breath becomes tighter. So helping the body to become more fluid. This is where cypress comes in. Now I know this is probably, I didn't say this much in the other video on cypress, and so I just wanted to throw this in because I've gotten heavily involved all of a sudden recently writing about it because of things that I've observed. And so when I got the question about what I would recommend, cypress definitely was the top one on the list because I see so many dopamine issues. How do I say that without having a diagnosis? Well, if I see people walking around with swollen ankles, which I see a lot of, that tells me the dopamine is being more used for more inflammatory purposes than anti-inflammatory purposes. If I see a movement disorder, whether it be Tourette's or Parkinson's or spasticity of the muscles, I see it's indicative of that really rigid thought process. And again, cypress actually benefits mental health because it helps improve the use of helps improve the use of nitric oxide synthase. And that's a whole other conversation to be had, but it does make a difference. It also helps with circulation. It helps with edema. It helps with the lymph. It helps with respiration. It helps with kidneys. So this combination of cypress, black spruce, mandarin leaf, marjoram, marjoram sweet, goldenrod, Roman chamomile, vetiver, and cilantro. And those will be listed in the box below because I know I've kind of been all over the board. So just know that I offer a lot of information because I really want people to understand what they're using and why they're using it. You don't have to use all these oils at the same time. If all you did was blend 2, maybe 3 at a time, maybe 4, or if you just used 3 or 4 of them at a time, you don't necessarily have to make a pre-blend them. You could just, but if you're doing it for somebody else, you can mix them up. But right, for the time being, I just say, again, if you're gonna, yeah, I'm just gonna say, those would be the ones to have on hand. And we'll get into the blending in a bit. But for the time being, even if you just took a couple of drops of each and put them in a carrier and applied them, none of these are going to irritate the skin. Like I said, they're safe for all ages. But this would be a good everyday kit to have around. That's how I would say that, because they don't necessarily, none of them directly affect any particular chemical, which is my big thing. None of them interact with any medications. So there's no specific influence on any particular chemical. It's all about stability. It's all about helping to regulate, create fluidity in the system so that the body can better take care of you. Okay, so anyway, I think that does it for today. Like I said, the oils are listed in the description box below. Please visit synergessence.com. That link is in the box below. Check out the 31 days of essential oils. I'm still adding to that as I do all these other things. And let me know if you have any questions. And thank you again for this request. It was really a delight to put this together for you. All right, thanks you guys, and I'll talk to you later.